Okay, so today we're diving into something that's, well, let's be honest, kind of scary to think about. The U.S. national debt.
Yeah, it's one of those things people hear about, but it seems so big and complicated.
Exactly. So we're tackling this video essay. The U.S. debt crisis is far worse than you think, and well, it doesn't sugarcoat things.
Not at all. They really lay out why this is way more serious than most people realize.
Like, just to throw out a couple numbers, in the last 15 years, the debt went from $9 trillion to, get this, $35 trillion.
It took, what, centuries to even hit that first $9 trillion? So this recent jump is totally unprecedented.
Seriously, if my bank account grew that fast, I wouldn't be complaining, but this is different.
It's definitely raising some eyebrows, let's put it that way. This speed,
Yeah.
it makes you wonder what's going to happen long term.
It's like watching someone max out their credit cards, but on a national scale. Like, how long can you keep that up?
Right, that's the big question. And the video uses this analogy, drunk, insolvent Uncle Sam.
Okay, now that's an image. So break it down for us. What's the drunk uncle all about?
Basically, they're saying the U.S. government is like that person who always spends more than they earn and just borrows constantly.
Oh man, like that friend who's all, let's split the bill evenly,
Hmm.
but they ordered the lobster.
Exactly. And this video argues the U.S. government's doing the same thing. Their spending habits are, well, unsustainable. And to get that, we got to understand how the government even gets money in the first place.
So no secret money printing going on, right?
Ah, tempting. But that leads to a whole other set of problems. No, there's two main ways. Taxes, which is part of our income funding stuff, and then there's borrowing.
Because those taxes, they only stretch so far, especially with the kind of spending we're talking.
And that's where borrowing comes in. They sell these things called US Treasury bonds, basically IOUs, saying, we'll pay you back later with interest.
So it's like a giant loan, but for the entire country.
You got it. And here's the kicker. A big chunk of those bonds, they're bought by, well, not Americans.
Wait, really? You mean other countries are lending us money?
Yep. The video calls him Average Mohammed, representing this whole global group who own a lot of U.S. debt. Now, it's not always a bad thing. U.S. debt is seen as pretty safe, and those bonds pay a decent return.
So in a way, it's like we benefit because they see us as a good investment. They're financing our spending.
Kind of, yeah. But like anytime you owe someone money, especially that much, it gets complicated. If they start thinking the U.S. is risky, they might demand higher interest or lend us less, and that could really hurt.
Makes sense. It's that feeling when you owe money to someone who's, shall we say, not super patient. Suddenly, that debt feels a lot heavier.
Right. It's a good reason to think about the bigger picture here, the global impact of all this. But before we go there, there's another layer we got to uncover. The video calls it the hidden debt monster, unfunded liabilities.
Okay, hidden debt monster definitely sounds ominous. What exactly are those, and why should we care?
Imagine this. You promise your grandkids college tuition, but you haven't actually saved anything for it. You're hoping you'll have enough when the time comes.
Yikes, that hits a little close to home. What's that got to do with the national debt?
Think of those promises like Social Security, Medicare, things millions rely on. They're good programs.
Yeah.
But the government hasn't put aside enough to actually cover them long term.
Hold on, so it's not even just the debt we already have, it's this whole other pile of future stuff that's not funded.
Exactly. And this pile is massive. The video says it could be over $200 trillion, way more than the official debt.
Okay, $200 trillion. My brain officially broke trying to imagine that. How do you even wrap your head around a number that big?
It's mind-boggling, and it shows just how serious this could get. But here's the thing, and what the video argues is so important. Just fixating on that giant number, that might be missing the real problem.
Okay, I'm listening. If it's not the debt itself that's the biggest issue, then what is it? What's even scarier than those crazy numbers?
They say the real villain here is the spending habits themselves, the policies that got us into this mess. They even compare it to a zombie apocalypse scenario.
Zombie apocalypse. Now, that's not a phrase you hear every day when talking about money.
Right. It definitely grabs your attention. They're using it to show how, in their view, all this unchecked spending, it can warp the economy in ways that really hurt certain groups of people. Think growing inequality, poverty traps, whole communities struggling.
So it's not just numbers on a page, it's about real people's lives being impacted.
Exactly. They're saying this level of government involvement in the economy, fueled by all this spending, it can really mess things up. Now, whether you agree with that or not, something to think about.
It sounds like they're drawing a pretty straight line from government spending to some really bad outcomes. But isn't it more complicated than that? Like, don't governments often spend more when there are already problems trying to fix things?
You've hit on a huge debate in economics. Does the government helping actually make things worse sometimes? This video definitely leans towards yes, but it's not that simple.
Right, because you've got things like Social Security, Medicare, millions depend on those.
Yeah.
Just cutting them would be, well, a disaster for a lot of people.
Exactly, and that's what makes this so tough. It's not just numbers, it's people's lives we're talking about. The video isn't saying those programs are bad, but that how we're paying for them, that's where things get shaky.
So less about ditching the system, more about rethinking how it works, how it's funded long term.
That's one way to look at it. And that's where understanding this unfunded liabilities thing is so important. If we're making promises for the future, we better be able to keep them right.
Which brings us back to that $200 trillion. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. What does that even look like if we don't fix it? What actually happens?
Well, imagine those benefits, Social Security, Medicare. Suddenly there's not enough money. That could mean people get less, have to pay more themselves, or even drastic stuff. Taxes go way up, other things get cut.
So it's like this ticking time bomb that if we ignore it, blows up the economy and hurts individuals.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah.
And that's why the video is all about getting spending under control, making smarter choices for the long haul.
Easier said than done, though, right? Every dollar the government spends, that's someone's job, a program, something. How do you even talk about cutting back without it turning into a political mess?
Oh, absolutely. This is just as much about politics as economics. And the video knows that. They're basically saying we need a whole new mindset on what the government should do, where our priorities are, and what we're willing to give up.
So less about crunching numbers, more about those tough conversations about our values, right? What matters most and what are we willing to sacrifice to actually fix this?
Exactly. And those aren't easy conversations, especially when you're talking about something as fundamental as the role of government. But this video, it argues that ignoring it all, just hoping it goes away,
Yeah.
that'll just make the crash even bigger later on.
So where do we even start? If we need to cut spending, what does that actually look like?
Well, it's not about just slashing everything randomly. You got to be smart about it. Look at where the money's going now. See what's wasteful or not working. Maybe some things need a total revamp.
Being more strategic, not just spending less, but spending smarter.
Exactly. Ask the tough questions. Is this giving us our money's worth? Is there a better way to do this? Some programs, they might have made sense once, but times change, right?
Right, so making sure every dollar has an impact, not just throwing money at a problem and hoping for the best.
Exactly. And that takes a real change from the people in charge and regular people too. We got to move past the easy answers, the political yelling, and actually have a real conversation about how to fix this.
Not easy these days, that's for sure. But it matters. So if we're talking solutions, where do we even begin?
Well, this video is all about the spending side, but it touches on something else that's huge: growing the economy. That can help a lot with debt.
Wait, so it's not just about cutting back, it's also about making more money as a country.
Right. Because when the economy grows, you get more taxes, things get a little easier to manage. They argue that creating the right conditions for that growth is key to fixing this whole thing long term.
So cuts alone aren't enough. We got to grow our way out of this too.
That's the argument. Policies that help businesses start, encourage new ideas, things like that.
Yeah.
That's how you get sustainable growth.
Isn't that a whole other debate, though? What actually causes that kind of growth? Seems like everyone's got a different opinion on that.
Oh, for sure. Economists have been arguing about that forever. The video doesn't get into specifics, but it makes the point that we got to unlock that potential somehow. More dynamic economy, that helps everyone.
So it's like a two-parter. Fix how the government spends and make it easier for the whole economy to succeed. That way, the debt becomes less of a monster.
That seems to be the message, and it's something a lot of economists agree on, no matter what their politics are. A healthy economy can solve a lot of problems, including this one.
So it's like trying to balance on 2 feet, right? Get that spending in check, but also, like, juice the economy at the same time. Easier said than done, I'm guessing.
Oh, you said it. Economics.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a precise recipe. There's always more than one answer, and what works sometimes backfires other times. It's messy.
That's what makes it so hard. If even the experts can't agree what the right answer is, how are regular people supposed to figure this out, let alone, like, convince politicians to do anything about it?
That's where being informed really matters. You're already doing it. Just by listening to this deep dive, learning about this stuff, that's the first step.
Well, I'm trying. But it's a lot. So bringing it back to this video, the U.S. debt crisis, what's the big takeaway here? What do you want people to remember?
I think it's a wake-up call. Straight up, this debt, maybe it's not an emergency right now, but it's huge, and if we ignore it, it'll catch up to us badly.
And it's more than just that $35 trillion, crazy as that is. It's how we got there, those unfunded promises, and owing so much to other countries.
Exactly. The video's saying, don't get distracted by the price tag alone, look at what's driving it, and what happens if we do nothing. Which, let's be honest, they don't paint a pretty picture.
Yeah, the whole zombie apocalypse bit.
Yeah.
A little dramatic, maybe, but it gets your attention. Even if you disagree with how bad they think it'll get, you gotta admit, the potential's there for things to go sideways.
Right, whether you buy their exact prediction or not,
Yeah.
it forces you to ask, what are we building towards right now with how we handle money?
That's a good question for, well, everyone, not just the government, huh? It's about the future we're making, not just for us, but for our kids and grandkids, too.
Absolutely. This isn't just about today, it's about the next generation inheriting all this.
Yeah.
And that's why just yelling about it, pointing fingers, that doesn't help. We need real talk, real solutions.
Finding common ground, being willing to compromise, stuff like that,
Uh-huh.
instead of just trying to win the argument.
Yeah. We're all in that together, whether we like it or not. The choices we're making now about spending, about the economy, that'll echo out for decades.
So, last question. If there's no easy fix, no magic wand to make the debt disappear, what are we regular people supposed to do about it?
Stay informed, first of all, like you're doing now. Talk to people, learn about it, and then hold those in charge accountable. Make them explain their choices, demand they think long-term, not just about the next election.
And maybe a little self-reflection, too. Are we willing to maybe give something up now to make sure things are better later on? For ourselves, for the country?
That's a great point to end on. It's not about easy answers. It's about understanding. It's hard, talking it through, and demanding better from our leaders. Yeah, but from ourselves, too.
Because at the end of the day, our nation's finances, it's not just numbers. It's about the choices we make, what we value, the world we leave behind.